Beyond Nigeria, overnight flash floods from the Nairobi River have killed about 10 persons, swept away dozens of cars, and disrupted flights in Kenya. Nairobi Police Commander George Sida said 8 victims were swept away by raging floodwaters, while 3 others died after being struck by electricity. Authorities said rescue teams and aid workers struggled overnight to reach affected neighborhoods as the flooded roads stalled operations, with more than 70 vehicles trapped in rising waters. The floods, which struck yesterday, overwhelmed drainage systems and turned streets into raging streams, leaving motorists stranded in the capital. In the meantime, the United States has imposed visa restrictions targeting Rwandan officials it accused of sponsoring the M23 rebels and undermining peace in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. In a statement, the Department of State said it will impose visa restrictions on several senior Rwandan officials for driving violence by continuing to support M23 and violating the Washington Accords. The department said all parties to the Washington Accords, including DR Congo and Rwanda, are expected to fully implement their commitment by neutralizing the FDLR armed group and withdrawing Rwandan troops. The U.S. visa restriction policy authorizes the Secretary of State to render inadmissible any alien whose entry into the country would have potential dangerous adverse foreign policy consequences. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Justice has convicted a Pakistani man, Asif Marchand, for planning to kill President Donald Trump and other prominent U.S. politicians 2 years ago at the behest of Iran. Marchand was accused of trying to recruit people into the U.S. in a plan targeting Trump and others in retaliation for Washington's killing of Iranian military commander Qasem Soleimani in 2020 during Trump's first term. In a statement, the Justice Department said the Pakistani man was attempting to commit an act of terrorism transcending national boundaries. In his remarks, however, Marchand admitted to joining the plot with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps unwillingly to protect his family in Tehran. In another development, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has announced the temporary suspension of attacks against the neighboring countries, saying they will no longer be targeted unless they attack first. The president also apologized to the countries for attacks launched during Iran's war with Israel and the United States. In a state broadcast, Pezeshkian said the Iranian Interim Leadership Council approved the motion. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and other Gulf countries have been targeted by Iran due to the presence of U.S. assets within and around their borders. You're still listening to Beyond Nigeria on Midas Radio 90.5 FM at Adeleke.
Remember to protect the land of honor and integrity. Please visit www.midasradio905.fm for more information, and you can follow us across our social media platforms at Midas Radio 905 for regular updates. You can also download our app on Apple or Play Store for convenient access and your listening pleasure. Midas Radio cares about you, and we are committed to bringing you stories that matter.
Many thanks for staying with us. Moving on to the rest of the news. About 16 people have been killed in overnight Israeli airstrikes on the eastern Lebanese town of Nabuchit. In a statement, Lebanon's health ministry described the strikes as one of the deadliest Israeli bombardments since war resumed this week. The health ministry said 35 people were wounded in the attacks, adding that the toll could rise further. According to reports, more than 200 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on Lebanon since Hezbollah launched rockets and drones into Israel earlier this week. In Europe, a barrage of Russian drones and missiles at Ukraine overnight today has damaged infrastructure and killed 7 people including 2 children in the northeastern city of Kharkiv. In a statement on Telegram, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia launched 480 drones and 29 missiles targeting the energy sector and railway infrastructure across the country. Zelensky said Russia has not abandoned its attempts to destroy Ukraine's residential and critical infrastructure, calling for response and support from partners. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has unveiled a plan to deploy as many as 100,000 members of Mexico's security forces during the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Sheinbaum made the announcement during a visit to Guadalajara, which had been struck by a wave of violence after Mexico launched a deadly military operation against cartel leader Nemesio Oseguera, who was killed in an exchange of gunfire. The president, in her remarks, reassured the public that Guadalajara and the whole of Mexico would be safe, particularly as security concerns ramp up ahead of the World Cup. Mexico is set to host 13 World Cup matches in 3 cities: Guadalajara, Mexico City, and Monterrey. Finally, on sport, Brazilian football star Neymar is facing a lawsuit from a former personal chef who claims she was subjected to grueling working conditions at his estate, leaving her with lasting physical injuries. According to reports, the chef said she was required to prepare meals daily for an entourage of up to 150 friends and associates, forcing her into 16-hour shifts, which exceeded the hours stipulated in her original contract and causing hip inflammations. The chef is seeking £37,544 in total compensation. Other than that, the figure is intended to cover severance pay, fines, unpaid overtime, and medical expenses for injuries sustained during her employment. Well, that's Beyond Nigeria this afternoon. Before we go, here is a recap of the major stories. Troops of the Nigerian army have killed 45 criminals during a fierce encounter with daredevil bandits terrorizing the Damosa LGA of Katsina State. Overnight flash floods from the Nairobi River have killed about 10 persons, swept away dozens of cars, and disrupted flights in Kenya. Finally, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has announced the suspension of attacks against neighboring countries. That's Beyond Nigeria, as edited by Ayotunde Adebiyi. I am Oluwasegun Adeleke. To enjoy the rest of your day. Good afternoon.